Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Alubari, a nice cup of tea. This is a 1 to 5 player worker placement economic train game where you take the role of tea entrepreneurs. The Alubari tea estate just opened in 1856, followed by more than 80 more tea estates, along with the construction of the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway between 1879 and 1881. You'll be using your worker to cultivate and harvest tea estates, along with contributing to the construction of the railway and building towns along the way, utilizing your contracts and equipment, trying to become the most successful entrepreneur. How do you become the most successful entrepreneur and win the game? By having the most victory points at the end of the final round. The final round is triggered differently based on the number of players. Now that we know what the winning condition is, let's take a look at the components, setup, and how gameplay works in Alubari, a nice cup of tea. Now let's take a look at the components. You have the main game board, starting player marker, game marker discs, game ownership markers, sun discs, fog discs, rain discs, steel bars, iron cubes, stone cubes, chai cubes, event cubes, rubble cubes and discs, cloth bag, equipment cards, estate cards, contract cards, action cards, help cards. In each player color, you have workers and ownership markers, tea leaf tiles in 1s and 5s, fog tiles, blockage tiles, score pad, and finally your rule book. Now let's take a look at the setup. We're going to be setting this up for a 3-player game, which takes 15 steps. Step 1, place the main board in the center of the play area. Step 2, place blocking tiles. Based on the number of players, place blocking tiles. When playing with fewer than 3 players, you'll place the Darjeeling blockage tile on the second Darjeeling station space. Then you'll place a number of blockage tiles at the end of the chai track. For 3 players, we'll place 2. Step 3, place the weather markers next to the weather track. Step 4, place fog tiles below the fog effect line. Step 5, place game marker discs. Place 3 game marker discs on the starting spaces of the excavation work rate, lay track work rate, and crop harvest work rate tracks. These are the dark green spaces on those tracks. Step 6, create supply pools. You'll place tea leaves, rubble cubes and discs, steel bars, and game ownership markers next to the main board. Step 7, place action overlay cards. Based on the number of players, you will place certain action overlay cards. In a 1 to 2 player game, you'll place A, D, F, and G. In a 3-player game, we will place none. And in a 4 to 5 player game, you'll place A, B, C, D, E, and G. Step 8, shuffle, place, and reveal contract cards. You'll shuffle the contract cards and place them to the right side of the main board face down. Then you will reveal the first 2 contracts and place them above the deck. Then based on the top card of the draw deck, you'll place the matching weather token on the lowest spot of the weather track. Then you will reveal the card and place it above the deck in the final spot. Then you'll place another weather marker based on the top card of the draw deck. Step 9, shuffle and place tea estate cards. You'll shuffle and place tea estate cards along the bottom of the main board. You'll be covering a number of spaces based on the number of players. Keep in mind that the Alubari tea estate, which is printed on the board, is recommended for your first game. After your first game, you may choose to cover that space with another tea estate card. Step 10, place rubble cubes. Place the matching number of rubble cubes on the estate cards. This is in the top left of each square or rectangle on the tea estate card. And keep in mind that 5 cubes is equal to 1 disc. Step 11, shuffle, draw, and place equipment cards. Shuffle the equipment cards and then draw and place 7 equipment cards. You'll return the remaining to the box. Once you've placed your equipment cards, if any of those cards have come with chai in the top right corner, you'll place a chai token on the card. Step 12, fill and draw the supply bag. Based on the number of players, you'll place a number of resources in the supply bag. The number that you will place is located in the rulebook. So for a 3-player game, we will place 27 iron and 15 stone, and then all of the chai remaining. Then we will draw a number of resources based on the number of players. In a solo game, you'll draw 6, and in a 2 to 5 player game, we will draw 12. And then we will place them in the top left of the main board. Step 13, place event cubes. You'll place a number of event cubes in the supply bag. If you're playing a solo game, you would place 4, and in a 2 to 5 player game, you'll place 5. Step 14, choose a color and get the matching player components. You'll choose a color and get the workers and ownership markers of that color. Place one of the workers on the tea house and one of your ownership tokens on the 0 of the chai track. You will leave the remaining in your player area. Step 15, choose a starting player. The last player to have a cup of tea is the start player and gets the start player marker. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. A game consists of a number of rounds until the final round is triggered. For a solo game, the last round is triggered when placing your last ownership marker. In a 2-player game, when one player places their last ownership marker, the other player will get one more round. In a 3 to 5 player game, when a player places an ownership marker on the last track space before Darjeeling, that would trigger the final round. A round consists of 5 phases: contracts, weather, stockyard and event, assign workers, and lastly, resolve actions. Now let's look at each in detail. Phase 1, restock contract cards. You will skip this phase in round 1. You will slide the contract cards up, and if any are in the top slot, they are discarded face down. Keep in mind that if the contract draw pile is empty, you would shuffle and refill from the discard pile. Then we go to phase 2, adjust the weather. You will skip this in round 1. You would remove any weather disc from the bottom space, and then slide down the remaining 2 discs. You would remove any fog markers from action space B and D. Then you would adjust the work rate markers based on the current weather. Then you would look at the top contract card in the draw pile and place the matching weather token on the top of the weather track. When looking at the work rate tracks, the excavation work rate refers to how many rubble cubes you can remove per excavation action. The lay track work rate refers to how much track you can lay per action. Keep in mind that each track requires 1 steel bar. And then the crop harvest refers to how much tea leaves you will produce per ownership marker in the tea estates. If during this phase an excavation work rate or crop harvest work rate reach the end of their tracks and they reach the leaf space, a tea harvest occurs. This can also happen during event 6 or a contract card. Each player will then get a number of tea leaves equal to the number of ownership markers on tea estates times the rate indicated on the crop harvest work rate. Then you would reset the crop harvest work rate to the green 1. Then we move to phase 3, restock the stockyard and process events. You'll skip this in round 1. During this phase, the stockyard is refilled based on the number of players. In a 1 to 2 player game, you'll draw 6 cubes from the bag. In a 3 player game, you'll draw 9 cubes from the bag. And in a 4 to 5 player game, you'll draw 12 cubes from the bag. You'll place the cubes on their stockyard spaces, and if any event cubes are drawn, you'll place them on the event track. You'll place them 1 per space, starting with number 1. Then you would resolve the corresponding events. A description of each event is located in the rulebook. Then we move to phase 4, assign workers. When starting this phase, players with at least 1 chai or equipment card can pay a chai to get an additional worker from the tea house for this round. Then the first player going clockwise, you'll place a worker on an empty numbered action space at the top of the main board. Then you will continue to go around until all workers are placed. Keep in mind that you do not have to place in numerical order. Once all workers are assigned, we move to phase 5, resolve actions and check the end game. In alphabetical order, A through G, actions are resolved in 2 steps, contracts and resolve actions numerically. So for each location, you start with contracts. With the start player going clockwise, players may use 1 or more contract special actions that they have with the current action area. Once you use the action, you would turn it sideways to indicate that you have used the action on the card. And then on the bottom of the card is a game end scoring bonus. Keep in mind that you do not lose points if you do not meet the bonus requirements. So if we started with A, anybody that had a contract with A on the card could use it now. Then you would resolve actions. You would resolve the actions in numerical order. Before resolving your action, players can pay a chai for a more powerful action. That addition is located below the card. Now let's take a look at each of the action areas. Action A, the stockyard. This is where you will gain cubes. Keep in mind that you are only able to take 1 chai cube, and if you take a chai cube, you discard it from the game and go up the chai track. If you're the player that places in spot 3, you will also get the start player marker immediately. Location B, excavation. You'll take a number of rubble equal to the work rate. If you empty a space on the tea estate, you would place one of your ownership tokens. Keep in mind that at the end of the round when the last rubble is taken, you would replace the action card for location B. Also keep in mind when removing rubble cubes, you have to remove rubble cubes left to right. Location C. This is where you will exchange cubes for steel, or rubble for stone, or stone for rubble. So in this case, yellow used their chai action to make steel using 2 iron. Location D, lay track. You will pay a steel bar for each track that you lay. The number of track that you are allowed to lay per action is based on the lay track work rate. Then you would place a number of ownership markers on the track. Keep in mind that if you have the steel, you have to lay up to the number listed on the lay track work rate. When placing your ownership markers on a track, it must be the next available track space on the railway. Location E, building. This is where you will build a station or buy equipment. To build a station, or the box below each town, you would pay the top of the box and gain the gold box. When doing so, you can place up to the next river space without an ownership marker. So if there was an ownership marker on the first river track space, then you could build a station in the next 3 towns. Keep in mind that when you are doing this, iron and stone are returned to the supply bag. When you choose to buy equipment, you would pay the cost in the upper left corner and place the card in front of you. And if it came with the chai token, you would discard the chai token from the game and go up the chai track. Location F, the post office, where you buy contracts. You would take one of the 3 face-up contract cards and place it vertically in your player area until it is used. And then location G, where you can take leaves or convert leaves to chai. You would take a number of tea leaves equal to the work rate, or you can convert tea leaves to chai in a 1-to-1 ratio. Then once all of the action areas have been resolved, you would check for the final round triggering condition, and if it is not met, you would move to the next round. Then rounds would continue until the last round is triggered. Then we would go into the final scoring. The final scoring takes 6 steps. Step 1, score tea estates. You would add all of your yellow boxes on the tea estates together. Step 2, score stations. Step 3, score completed track spaces. Step 4, score contract cards. Keep in mind that each resource and track can only count once for your contracts. Step 5, score chai and tea leaves based on the track and gain 1/2 of a point for each tea leaf you have in your supply. And then step 6, score equipment. Then you would add your total together, and the player with the highest total is the most successful entrepreneur and wins Alubari, a nice cup of tea.